Emma Martinez had always been a dedicated student, the kind who arrived early to class and stayed late to ask questions. At 17, she carried herself with quiet confidence, her dark hair always neatly pulled back, her notebooks filled with meticulous notes. Washington High School's advanced literature class was her favorite, and Mr. Davidson had quickly become her most respected teacher. David Davidson was 34, married with 2 young children, and had been teaching for 8 years. Students admired his passion for poetry and his ability to make even the most complex texts come alive. His classroom walls were covered with literary quotes, and he had a reputation for going above and beyond to help struggling students. Emma wasn't struggling, but she found herself drawn to his teaching style and the way he seemed to genuinely care about his students' futures. It started innocently enough. After a particularly engaging discussion about symbolism in modern poetry, Emma approached Mr. Davidson's desk with questions about college applications. She had dreams of studying English literature at a prestigious university, and Mr. Davidson seemed eager to help. He offered to write her a recommendation letter and suggested they meet during lunch periods to discuss her college essay. The first few meetings were exactly what Emma expected. They sat in his classroom, door open, discussing her essay topics and college choices. Mr. Davidson provided valuable feedback and shared stories about his own college experience. Emma felt grateful to have such a supportive mentor, someone who believed in her potential and was willing to invest time in her success. As weeks passed, their conversations began to shift. Mr. Davidson started asking more personal questions about Emma's life outside school. He wanted to know about her family, her friends, and her weekend activities. Emma found it flattering that a teacher she respected was taking such interest in her as a person, not just as a student. She began sharing more about her home life, her parents' expectations, and the pressure she felt to excel in everything. Mr. Davidson listened with what seemed like genuine concern and understanding. He told her she was mature beyond her years, and that he could relate to the pressure she felt. Sometimes he would share his own struggles with work-life balance and the challenges of being an adult. These conversations made Emma feel special, like she was being treated as an equal rather than just another student. The meetings started extending beyond their scheduled times. What began as 30-minute lunch sessions stretched to an hour or more. Mr. Davidson would often say they were making such good progress that he didn't want to stop. Emma's grades in all her classes remained excellent, so she didn't see any harm in dedicating extra time to college preparation. One afternoon, Mr. Davidson suggested they continue their discussion over coffee at a nearby cafe. He explained that the school environment could be distracting, and that a change of scenery might help Emma think more creatively about her essays. Emma hesitated briefly, wondering if meeting outside school was appropriate, but Mr. Davidson assured her it was perfectly normal. Many teachers, he said, met with their most promising students outside school hours to provide additional guidance. The coffee meeting felt different from their classroom sessions. Away from the academic environment, their conversation became more personal and intimate. Mr. Davidson shared details about his marriage, mentioning that his wife didn't always understand the demands of teaching and the emotional investment he made in his students' futures. Emma found herself confiding in him about her own relationship insecurities and her fears about leaving home for college. As they talked, Mr. Davidson reached across the table and briefly touched Emma's hand, telling her she had nothing to worry about and that any college would be lucky to have her. The gesture felt supportive at the time, though something about it lingered in Emma's mind as she walked home that evening. She told herself she was overthinking things and that Mr. Davidson was simply being encouraging. Their text messaging began shortly after the coffee meeting. Mr. Davidson had asked for Emma's phone number to coordinate their meetings more easily. At first, the messages were purely academic, sharing articles or discussing points from their conversations. But gradually, the texts became more frequent and personal. Mr. Davidson would check in on how Emma was feeling, ask about her day, and sometimes send messages late in the evening, expressing how much he enjoyed their conversations. Emma found herself looking forward to these messages more than she cared to admit. In a world where she often felt misunderstood by her peers and pressured by her parents, Mr. Davidson seemed to truly see and appreciate who she was. His messages made her feel valued and special in a way that was both thrilling and confusing. The other students in class began to notice the special attention Emma was receiving. Some made joking comments about her being the teacher's pet, while others seemed envious of the obvious favoritism. Emma tried to brush off their comments, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something about the situation was beginning to feel uncomfortable. During one of their coffee meetings, Mr. Davidson mentioned that his wife would be out of town the following weekend visiting her sister. He suggested that Emma come to his house to work on her college applications, explaining that he had reference books and resources there that weren't available at school. His home office, he said, would provide the perfect quiet environment for focused work. Emma felt a knot form in her stomach at the suggestion. Something about meeting at his house, especially when his wife wouldn't be there, felt wrong. But when she hesitated, Mr. Davidson seemed hurt and asked if she didn't trust him. He reminded her of how much he had already helped her and how committed he was to seeing her succeed. He made her feel guilty for questioning his motives, suggesting that her hesitation showed a lack of maturity and sophistication. Against her better judgment, Emma agreed to the meeting. As she walked home that day, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was crossing a line she couldn't uncross. The excitement and nervousness she felt were mixed with a growing sense of unease. She had always prided herself on her good judgment and ability to make smart decisions. But now she found herself questioning everything about the relationship she had developed with Mr. Davidson. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Emma replayed every conversation, every text message, and every moment of physical contact. For the first time, she began to wonder if Mr. Davidson's interest in her was purely academic and professional, or if something else was motivating his attention and generosity with his time. The weekend arrived faster than Emma had expected. Saturday morning brought a mix of anticipation and anxiety that she couldn't shake. She had told her parents she was going to study with a classmate, a lie that sat heavy in her stomach. As she stood in front of her mirror, changing outfits for the third time, she questioned every decision that had led her to this moment. Mr. Davidson's house was in a quiet suburban neighborhood, with a well-maintained lawn and children's toys scattered. In the yard, Emma parked her car across the street and sat for several minutes, her hands gripping the steering wheel. Everything looked so normal, so innocent. She reminded herself that she was there to work on college applications, nothing more. Mr. Davidson was a respected teacher who had always been professional and supportive. When she finally knocked on the front door, Mr. Davidson answered with a warm smile, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater. The house smelled like coffee and cinnamon, and she could hear soft music playing in the background. He led her to his home office, a cozy room lined with bookshelves and decorated with family photos. Emma felt some of her tension ease as she saw the familiar academic environment. They began working on her personal statement, with Mr. Davidson offering suggestions and encouragement as she wrote. For the first hour, everything felt perfectly normal and appropriate. Emma began to relax, feeling foolish for her earlier concerns. Mr. Davidson was being the same supportive mentor he had always been, and she was getting valuable help with her applications. As they worked, Mr. Davidson brought her coffee and homemade cookies, explaining that baking was a hobby he had picked up during the pandemic. The gesture felt thoughtful and caring, reinforcing Emma's belief that she had been overthinking the situation. They discussed her essay topics, her career aspirations, and the colleges she was most excited about attending. Midway through the afternoon, the dynamic began to shift subtly. Mr. Davidson moved his chair closer to Emma's, ostensibly to better see her computer screen as they edited her essay. His proximity made Emma uncomfortable, but she didn't know how to address it without seeming ungrateful or immature. When he placed his hand on her shoulder while reading over her work, she tensed but said nothing. The conversation gradually became more personal again. Mr. Davidson talked about how proud he was of Emma's growth and maturity, how she stood out from her classmates in ways that went beyond academics. He told her she had an old soul, and that he felt more comfortable talking to her than to most adults he knew. Emma found herself both flattered and increasingly uneasy with the direction of their conversation. When Mr. Davidson suggested they take a break and move to the living room, Emma agreed, hoping the change of scenery would reset the atmosphere. They sat on opposite ends of the couch initially, continuing their conversation about literature and college. But as time passed, Mr. Davidson moved closer, eventually sitting beside Emma as he showed her passages in a book of poetry. The physical closeness made Emma's heart race, but not entirely in a good way. She found herself holding her breath, afraid to move or speak. When Mr. Davidson put his arm around her shoulders, explaining that she seemed tense and that he wanted her to feel comfortable in his home, Emma felt frozen. Part of her wanted to leave immediately, but she didn't trust her instincts. She had been taught to respect authority figures and not to question the motives of adults who were trying to help her. Mr. Davidson began talking about the special connection they had developed and how rare it was to find someone who truly understood him. He told Emma that his wife had become distant and that their marriage lacked the intellectual and emotional connection he craved. Emma felt overwhelmed by these revelations and unsure how to respond. She had never been put in the position of being someone's confidant about such personal matters. As the afternoon wore on, Mr. Davidson's behavior became increasingly inappropriate. He began touching Emma's hair, commenting on how beautiful she was, and telling her that she was far more mature and interesting than girls her age typically were. Emma felt paralyzed, caught between her respect for his authority and her growing discomfort with the situation. When Mr. Davidson leaned in to kiss her, Emma finally found her voice and pulled away. She stood up quickly, her heart pounding, and announced that she needed to leave. Mr. Davidson immediately apologized, claiming that he had misread the situation and that he was going through a difficult time in his personal life. He begged her not to be upset with him and assured her that it wouldn't happen again. Emma gathered her belongings hastily, her hands shaking as she packed her laptop and notes. Mr. Davidson followed her to the door, continuing to apologize and asking her to please not let this incident affect their mentoring relationship. He reminded her how much he had helped her and how important her college applications were. He made it clear that he hoped she would be mature enough to understand that adults sometimes made mistakes and that their academic relationship was too valuable to throw away over a momentary lapse in judgment. As Emma drove home, her mind raced, with confusion and self-doubt. She replayed the afternoon's events, wondering if she had somehow encouraged Mr. Davidson's behavior or if she was overreacting to what he claimed was a simple mistake. The voice in her head alternated between anger at his inappropriate behavior and guilt for potentially destroying a relationship that had been genuinely helpful to her academic future. That evening, Emma couldn't concentrate on her homework or enjoy dinner with her family. Her parents asked if she was feeling well, and she managed to convince them she was just tired from studying. She went to bed early, but lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and trying to process what had happened. She felt confused, violated, and utterly alone with her experience. The next morning brought a text message from Mr. Davidson, asking how she was feeling and expressing hope that they could put the previous day behind them. He reminded her that they had scheduled another meeting for the following week, and that he was still committed to helping her with her college applications. The message made Emma feel sick to her stomach, but she didn't know how to respond or what she should do next. Emma realized that the situation had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The mentor she had trusted and respected had revealed himself to be someone entirely different, someone who was willing to exploit his position of authority and her trust for his own gratification. She faced the terrifying realization that she would need to make some very difficult decisions about how to handle the situation and protect herself from further harm. Monday morning arrived with the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. Emma sat in her car in the school parking lot, staring at the brick building that had once felt like a safe haven. Now it housed her biggest source of anxiety and confusion. She knew that in less than an hour she would have to face Mr. Davidson in literature class and pretend that nothing had changed between them. The weekend had been a blur of internal conflict. Emma had spent hours researching inappropriate teacher-student relationships online, trying to understand what had happened to her and whether she bore any responsibility for the situation. The articles she found painted a clear picture that made her stomach turn. She was a victim of grooming and sexual harassment by a person in a position of authority. But reading those words applied to her situation felt surreal and overwhelming. As she walked through the school hallways, Emma felt like everyone was looking at her, though she knew rationally that was impossible. Her closest friend, Sarah, noticed her distraction immediately and asked if everything was okay. Emma managed a weak smile and claimed she was just stressed about college applications. The lie came easier than she expected, but it left her feeling even more isolated. Literature class was torture. Emma chose a seat in the back corner, as far from Mr. Davidson's desk as possible. She avoided eye contact and kept her head down, furiously taking notes even when the discussion didn't warrant such detailed attention. Mr. Davidson conducted class normally, but Emma caught him glancing in her direction several times. Each look felt like a violation, a reminder of their shared secret that she desperately wanted to forget. After class, as students filed out, Mr. Davidson called Emma's name. Her blood turned to ice, but she couldn't ignore him without drawing attention from her classmates. She approached his desk reluctantly, her bag clutched tightly against her chest like a shield. Mr. Davidson smiled warmly as if nothing had happened, and asked how her weekend had been. The casual tone of his voice made Emma feel like she was losing her mind. He reminded her about their scheduled meeting that week and expressed enthusiasm about continuing work on her college essays. Emma mumbled something non-committal about being busy and quickly left the classroom. In the hallway, she leaned against a locker and tried to catch her breath. The normalcy of his behavior made her question her own memories and reactions. Had she overreacted? Was she making too big a deal of what happened? The text messages continued throughout the week. Mr. Davidson sent them at various times, always maintaining a tone that balanced professional concern with personal warmth. He asked about her progress on applications, shared articles he thought she'd find interesting, and occasionally made comments about missing their productive conversations. Emma read each message with growing dread, but couldn't bring herself to respond or block his number. By Wednesday, Emma's grades in other classes began to suffer. She couldn't concentrate during lessons and had fallen behind on assignments. Her usually meticulous note-taking became scattered and incomplete. Her chemistry teacher, Mrs. Thompson, asked her to stay after class to discuss a failed quiz. Emma broke down in tears, unable to explain what was wrong without revealing the truth about her situation. Mrs. Thompson, a kind woman in her 50s, offered Emma a tissue and a listening ear. Without fully intending to, Emma found herself sharing pieces of her story. She didn't mention Mr. Davidson by name, but described feeling uncomfortable with attention from a teacher and not knowing how to handle it. Mrs. Thompson's expression grew serious as she listened, and she gently suggested that Emma might want to talk to the school counselor. That afternoon, Emma found herself sitting in the guidance office across from Ms. Rodriguez, the school counselor. Ms. Rodriguez was known for being approachable and trustworthy, someone who had helped many students through difficult situations. Emma had always respected her but had never needed her services before. Now, facing the prospect of revealing her shameful secret, Emma felt paralyzed with fear and embarrassment. Ms. Rodriguez seemed to sense Emma's reluctance and spoke gently about the confidential nature of their conversations. She explained that her job was to help students navigate challenges and that she had seen and heard everything over her 20 years in education. Her calm, non-judgmental demeanor helped Emma feel slightly more at ease, though her heart still raced as she considered what to say. Emma began slowly, describing her mentoring relationship with a teacher and how it had evolved over time. She talked about the special attention, the personal conversations, and the gradual shift from academic support to something more personal and uncomfortable. Ms. Rodriguez listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions that helped Emma organize her thoughts. When Emma finally revealed the incident at Mr. Davidson's house, she broke down completely. The shame and confusion she had been carrying for days poured out in great heaving sobs. Ms. Rodriguez handed her tissues and waited patiently for Emma to compose herself enough to continue. She assured Emma that what had happened was not her fault, and that she had been right to trust her instincts about the inappropriateness of the situation. Ms. Rodriguez explained that what Emma had experienced constituted sexual harassment and potentially criminal behavior. She outlined Emma's options, which included filing a formal complaint with the school administration, reporting the incident to law enforcement, or simply focusing on protecting herself from further contact. Each option felt overwhelming and terrifying to Emma, who had hoped that talking to someone would make her feel better, not present her with even more difficult decisions. The counselor emphasized that whatever Emma decided to do, she would have support and resources available to her. She explained the school's policies regarding teacher-student relationships and assured Emma that Mr. Davidson's behavior was a serious violation of professional ethics and legal boundaries. Ms. Rodriguez also offered to involve Emma's parents. In the conversation, which immediately triggered panic in Emma's mind, Emma begged Ms. Rodriguez not to contact her parents immediately, explaining that she needed time to process everything and figure out how to explain the situation. Her parents had high expectations for her academic success, and she feared they would blame her for getting involved with a teacher or question her judgment. Ms. Rodriguez agreed to give Emma a few days to consider her options, but explained that if there were any further incidents, she might be required to take immediate action to protect Emma's safety. As Emma left the counseling office, she felt both relief and terror. Finally, someone knew the truth about what had happened, and that person had confirmed that she wasn't crazy or oversensitive. But now she faced the daunting prospect of deciding what to do with that validation. The options Ms. Rodriguez had outlined all seemed to involve exposing her situation to more people and potentially destroying Mr. Davidson's career and family. That evening, Emma sat in her room staring at her college application essays, the documents that had started this entire nightmare. The irony wasn't lost on her that her pursuit of academic excellence had led her into such a devastating situation. She realized that whatever happened next would likely change the trajectory of her senior year and possibly her entire future. The weight of that responsibility felt crushing for a 17-year-old who had always tried to do everything right. Friday evening brought an unexpected phone call that would change everything. Emma was in her room attempting to work on homework when her younger sister, Maya, knocked on her door. Their parents were at Maya's soccer game, leaving the house, unusually quiet. Maya, who was 14 and looked up to Emma tremendously, seemed upset about something that had happened at school. Through tears, Maya revealed that her art teacher, Mr. Peterson, had been making her uncomfortable with inappropriate comments and requests to stay after class alone. As Maya described her experiences, Emma felt a sickening sense of déjà vu. The pattern was identical to what she had experienced with Mr. Davidson. The special attention, the personal conversations, the gradual boundary crossing, and the confusion about whether the adult's behavior was appropriate. Emma's protective instincts kicked in immediately. The thought of Maya going through what she had experienced filled her with rage and determination. She held her sister while Maya cried, assuring her that she had done nothing wrong and that Mr. Peterson's behavior was completely inappropriate. Emma realized that her silence about Mr. Davidson might be enabling other predatory teachers to continue victimizing students. That night, Emma made a decision that had been brewing since her conversation with Ms. Rodriguez. She couldn't allow other students to be subjected to the manipulation and harassment she had endured. If teachers like Mr. Davidson were willing to cross boundaries with one student, they were likely doing it with others. Her silence was not protecting anyone. It was potentially putting other vulnerable students at risk. Saturday morning, Emma called Ms. Rodriguez's emergency number, a resource the counselor had provided for situations that couldn't wait until Monday. Ms. Rodriguez listened as Emma explained her sister's situation and her decision to formally report both teachers. The counselor praised Emma's courage and arranged to meet with both sisters and their parents over the weekend to begin the process of filing official complaints. Telling her parents was the most difficult conversation Emma had ever had. She and Ms. Rodriguez had agreed to meet at the family's home to ensure a comfortable environment for such a sensitive discussion. When Emma's parents, Maria and Carlos Martinez, learned about both situations, their reactions ran the gamut from shock and anger to guilt about not recognizing the warning signs. Maria Martinez, a nurse who had always been protective of her daughters, was furious at both teachers and the system that had allowed such behavior to occur. Carlos Martinez, a quiet man who worked in construction, struggled to contain his rage and had to step outside several times during the conversation to collect himself. Both parents immediately expressed their full support for whatever actions Emma and Maya wanted to take. Ms. Rodriguez explained the formal complaint process and the various agencies that would become involved once reports were filed. She outlined the potential consequences for the teachers, which could include immediate suspension, criminal charges, and permanent revocation of their teaching licenses. She also prepared the family for the scrutiny and potential backlash they might face as accusers in such cases. Emma learned that filing a formal complaint would trigger several investigations simultaneously. The school district would conduct an internal investigation, the state education department would review the teachers' licenses, and law enforcement would determine whether criminal charges were warranted. Each investigation would require Emma and Maya to recount their experiences multiple times to different officials. The process began immediately. Sunday afternoon brought investigators from the school district to the Martinez home. Emma found herself telling her story again, this time in even greater detail and with more specific questions about dates, locations, and witnesses. The investigator, a stern woman named Dr. Patricia Holmes, took extensive notes and assured Emma that the district took such allegations very seriously. Dr. Holmes explained that both Mr. Davidson and Mr. Peterson would be placed on immediate administrative leave pending the investigation. This meant they would not be allowed on school property or to contact any students. Emma felt a mixture of relief and anxiety about this development. She was glad to be protected from further contact, but she also worried about the disruption to other students' education and the attention her complaint would inevitably attract. Monday morning brought chaos to Washington High School. News of the teachers' suspensions had spread quickly through the school community, though the specific reasons and accusers remained officially confidential. Emma arrived at school to find clusters of students whispering in hallways and speculation running wild about what had happened. Some students expressed support for the suspended teachers, claiming they were good educators who couldn't possibly have done anything wrong. Others shared their own stories of uncomfortable interactions or boundary crossings that they had previously dismissed as harmless. Emma realized that her decision to come forward had opened a floodgate of revelations about inappropriate behavior that had been occurring in their school for years. Emma's literature class was covered by a substitute teacher who seemed overwhelmed by the students' questions about Mr. Davidson's absence. Emma sat through the class feeling like everyone was staring at her, wondering if she was somehow connected to the situation. After class, several students approached her with questions, but she followed Ms. Rodriguez's advice and refused to discuss anything about the investigation. By Tuesday, Emma's identity as one of the complainants had leaked despite official attempts to maintain confidentiality. She began receiving mixed reactions from classmates, some supportive and others hostile. A group of Mr. Davidson's favorite students confronted Emma in the hallway, accusing her of ruining a good teacher's life and questioning her motives for making what they assumed were false accusations. The confrontation was witnessed by several teachers who intervened and reported the incident to administration. Emma found herself back in Ms. Rodriguez's office, this time discussing safety concerns and the possibility of completing her senior year through independent study to avoid the toxic environment that was developing at school. Meanwhile, the investigation was uncovering disturbing patterns of behavior from both teachers. Other students had come forward with similar experiences, and investigators had discovered inappropriate text messages and emails on the teachers' school computers. The evidence was building a strong case that Emma and Maya's experiences were part of a larger pattern of predatory behavior. Detective Sarah Mitchell from the local police department contacted the Martinez family to schedule interviews about potential criminal charges. Emma learned that in their state, sexual harassment of a minor by a person in authority could result in felony charges, even if no physical contact occurred. The detective explained that the text messages, private meetings, and inappropriate comments Emma had documented could constitute criminal behavior under state law. As the week progressed, Emma felt the weight of her decision in new ways. Media outlets had begun reporting on the investigation, though they couldn't name minors involved. The story was generating community-wide discussions about teacher-student boundaries and school safety protocols. Emma realized that her choice to speak up had implications far beyond her own situation. The stress of the investigation, combined with the social pressure at school and the media attention, began taking a toll on Emma's mental and physical health. She lost weight, had trouble sleeping, and found it impossible to concentrate on college applications or schoolwork. Ms. Rodriguez arranged for Emma to receive counseling services and academic support to help her navigate this difficult period. Despite the challenges, Emma felt a growing sense of empowerment as the investigation proceeded. She had taken control of a situation that had made her feel powerless and vulnerable. More importantly, she had protected her sister and potentially other students from experiencing similar abuse. The knowledge that her courage was making a difference helped sustain her through the most difficult moments of the process. 3 weeks into the investigation, Emma's world shifted dramatically when Detective Mitchell called with unexpected news. A former student from another school district had seen the media coverage and contacted police with her own story about Mr. Davidson. Jessica Chen, now a college sophomore, had been subjected to similar grooming and harassment when she was 17, just 2 years earlier at Davidson's previous school. Jessica's story was remarkably similar to Emma's experience, but it had progressed much further. She described months of inappropriate text messages, secret meetings, and ultimately a sexual relationship that lasted several months during her senior year. Jessica had never reported the abuse, carrying the shame and trauma alone through her first year of college. Seeing Emma's courage in the news had given her the strength to finally come forward. This revelation transformed the investigation from harassment charges to potential felony sexual misconduct with minors. Detective Mitchell explained to Emma and her parents that Jessica's testimony, combined with the pattern of behavior Emma had documented, created a strong criminal case against Mr. Davidson. The detective praised Emma for her bravery, explaining, that without her initial report, Jessica might never have felt safe enough to share her story. The school district's investigation had also uncovered disturbing evidence. Mr. Davidson's computer contained hundreds of saved photos of female students, many cropped from school activities or social media accounts. His browser history revealed frequent searches for his female students' social media profiles, and investigators found draft messages that were never sent, but contained inappropriate comments about students' appearances. Emma felt vindicated, but also sickened by the extent of Mr. Davidson's predatory behavior. The evidence painted a picture of a calculated predator who had systematically identified and targeted vulnerable students across multiple schools. She realized how close she had come to becoming another victim like Jessica, and the thought filled her with both gratitude for her escape and determination to ensure justice. Meanwhile, Maya's case against Mr. Peterson was revealing similar patterns. 2 other students had come forward with comparable experiences, and the art teacher's inappropriate behavior appeared to be escalating with each victim. Maya, being younger and more trusting, had been particularly vulnerable to his manipulation. Emma felt fierce pride in her sister's courage, and relieved that they had intervened before Maya's situation progressed to physical abuse. The media attention intensified as more details emerged about both cases. Local news stations reported on what they called a scandal of epidemic proportions at Washington High School. Parents demanded accountability from school administration, questioning how 2 predatory teachers had operated undetected for so long. The school board scheduled emergency meetings to address community concerns and review safety protocols. Emma found herself at the center of a controversy much larger than she had anticipated. Some community members hailed her as a hero who had exposed dangerous individuals and protected other students. Others questioned whether the accusations were valid or if the situation was being blown out of proportion by overzealous investigators and sensational media coverage. The stress began manifesting in physical symptoms that Emma couldn't ignore. She developed headaches, stomach problems, and anxiety that interfered with her daily functioning. Her grades, which had always been excellent, dropped significantly as she struggled to focus on anything beyond the investigation and its aftermath. Her parents arranged for her to see a therapist who specialized in adolescent trauma and sexual abuse. Dr. Rebecca Norton, Emma's therapist, helped her understand that her reactions were normal responses to an abnormal situation. She explained that victims of grooming often experience guilt, confusion, and self-blame, even when they intellectually understand they did nothing wrong. The therapy sessions provided Emma with coping strategies and validation that her feelings were legitimate and healthy. As the criminal cases moved forward, Emma learned that both teachers had hired experienced defense attorneys who would likely challenge the accusations aggressively. Mr. Davidson's lawyer had already begun suggesting that Emma was a troubled student who had misinterpreted normal mentoring relationships. Emma's legal team, provided by the district attorney's office, prepared her for the possibility of having her character and motives questioned publicly. The defense strategy became clear when Mr. Davidson's attorney requested Emma's school records, social media accounts, and psychological evaluations. The lawyer argued that Emma's mental state and academic performance were relevant to her credibility as a witness. Emma felt violated all over again by these invasions of her privacy, but the prosecutor assured her that such tactics were standard defense strategies designed to intimidate victims. Emma's college application process, which had originally brought her into Mr. Davidson's orbit, had become an afterthought amid the investigation. Several of her application deadlines had passed, and her grades were no longer competitive for the prestigious universities she had once hoped to attend. Ms. Rodriguez worked with Emma to identify schools with later deadlines and more flexible admission policies for students dealing with extenuating circumstances. The social dynamics at school continued to be challenging for both Emma and Maya. While many students supported them privately, others remained loyal to the suspended teachers, or blamed the sisters for disrupting the school community. Emma overheard conversations suggesting that she and Maya were seeking attention or trying to get revenge against teachers who had given them poor grades. One particularly difficult incident occurred when Mrs. Davidson, the teacher's wife, approached Emma's mother at a grocery store. The encounter, witnessed by several community members, involved Mrs. Davidson tearfully pleading with Maria Martinez to convince Emma to recant her accusations. She described the devastating impact on her family and begged for mercy for her husband, claiming he was a good man who had made a mistake. Maria Martinez handled the situation with dignity but firmness, explaining that she supported her daughter completely, and that the investigation would proceed regardless of the personal consequences. The encounter was later reported in local media, further intensifying public interest in the case and putting additional pressure on the Martinez family. Emma began receiving both supportive and hostile messages through social media despite her attempts to maintain privacy. Supporters praised her courage and shared their own experiences with inappropriate behavior from authority figures. Critics accused her of seeking attention, destroying innocent lives, and damaging the reputation of their school and community. The pressure reached a breaking point when someone posted Emma's home address online, accompanied by threatening messages. The family contacted police, who increased patrols around their house and advised them about safety precautions. Emma realized that her decision to seek justice had put her entire family at risk, adding another layer of guilt and stress to her already overwhelming situation. Despite the challenges, Emma found strength in unexpected sources. Jessica Chen, the former student who had also come forward against Mr. Davidson, became a source of support and understanding. The two young women connected through their shared experience and Jessica's perspective as someone further along in the healing process provided Emma with hope for her own recovery. Support groups for victims of abuse helped Emma realize that her experience was unfortunately common and that her decision to speak out was part of a larger movement of survivors, finding their voices. She learned about other cases where students' courage in reporting abuse had led to the removal of predatory teachers and the implementation of better safety protocols in schools. 6 months after Emma first walked into Ms. Rodriguez's office, she stood in a courthouse preparing to testify in the criminal trial of David Davidson. The intervening months had been a journey of healing, growth, and advocacy that had transformed her from a confused teenager into a confident young woman with a clear sense of purpose and justice. The criminal case had moved forward more quickly than expected due to the overwhelming evidence and Jessica Chen's powerful testimony. Mr. Davidson had initially maintained his innocence, but as more evidence emerged and additional victims came forward, his legal team began exploring plea bargain options. Emma learned that 2 more former students had contacted authorities with similar experiences, creating a pattern that spanned nearly 5 years and 3 different schools. Emma's testimony was crucial to establishing the grooming pattern that, prosecutors argued, showed Mr. Davidson's calculated predatory behavior. Standing in the witness box, wearing a navy blue dress her mother had bought specially for the occasion, Emma felt nervous but determined. She had practiced her testimony numerous times with the prosecutor, but facing Mr. Davidson in person after all these months still made her heart race. As she recounted her story under oath, Emma felt a profound sense of closure and empowerment. The defense attorney's cross-examination was aggressive, as expected, but Emma remained calm and consistent in her responses. Dr. Norton's coaching had prepared her well for the attempt to discredit her testimony, and she answered each question, honestly, without becoming defensive or emotional. The most powerful moment came when Emma looked directly at Mr. Davidson while describing how his betrayal of her trust had affected her education, mental health, and sense of safety. She saw him look away, unable to maintain eye contact, and she realized that he knew exactly what he had done wrong. The man who had once seemed so confident and authoritative now appeared small and defeated. Jessica Chen's testimony the following day was even more devastating to the defense case. As an adult survivor who had completed therapy and found stability in her life, Jessica could articulate the long-term impact of Mr. Davidson's abuse with clarity and composure. She described how the inappropriate relationship had affected her college experience, her ability to trust authority figures, and her mental health for years afterward. The trial concluded with Mr. Davidson accepting a plea bargain that included 3 felony counts of sexual misconduct with minors and 1 count of abuse of authority. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison, 5 years of probation, and lifetime registration as a sex offender. His teaching license was permanently revoked, and he was prohibited from working in any capacity with minors. Mr. Peterson's case had concluded months earlier with similar results. The art teacher had been sentenced to 2 years in prison and permanent removal from the education profession. Maya, now in therapy and doing well academically, had testified with poise and strength. That made Emma incredibly proud of her younger sister's courage. The school district faced significant consequences as well. A civil lawsuit filed by the Martinez family and other victims resulted in a substantial settlement and mandatory implementation of new safety protocols. The district was required to provide comprehensive training for all staff on recognizing and reporting inappropriate relationships, establish clear boundaries for teacher-student interactions, and create anonymous reporting systems for students. Emma's senior year had been drastically different from what she had originally planned, but it had been meaningful in ways she never could have anticipated. She finished her coursework through a combination of independent study and online classes, graduating with honors despite the disruption to her education. Her college plans had evolved as well, leading her to choose a university with a strong social work program rather than the English literature path she had originally envisioned. The experience had sparked a passion for advocacy and victim support that Emma realized would likely define her career path. She had begun volunteering with a local organization that provided support to young victims of abuse, sharing her story when appropriate and helping other survivors navigate the reporting and legal processes she had experienced firsthand. Emma's relationship with her family had grown stronger through the ordeal. Her parents' unwavering support and Maya's resilience had created deeper bonds between them all. They had learned to communicate more openly about difficult topics and had developed a family culture that prioritized honesty and emotional safety above all else. The community response had gradually shifted as the facts of the cases became public and more victims shared their experiences. What had initially been a divisive controversy evolved into a broader conversation about protecting children and holding institutions accountable for the safety of the students in their care. Emma found herself invited to speak at school board meetings and community forums about student safety and the importance of believing young victims when they report abuse. 1 year after the trial concluded, Emma received a letter from another young woman who had seen media coverage of her case. The letter thanked Emma for her courage in coming forward and explained that reading about her experience had given the writer strength to report her own abusive teacher at a different school. Emma realized that her decision to speak up had created a ripple effect that was protecting students she would never meet in places she would never visit. Emma's college experience was enriched by her advocacy work and her clear sense of purpose. She excelled in her social work classes and secured internships with organizations that supported survivors of abuse. Her professors recognized her unique perspective and life experience as valuable assets in her chosen field, and she was frequently asked to share her insights in class discussions and research projects. The trauma of her experience with Mr. Davidson never completely disappeared, but it transformed from a source of shame and confusion into a wellspring of strength and purpose. Emma learned that healing was not about forgetting what happened, but about integrating the experience into her life story in a way that empowered rather than diminished her. She discovered that her voice, once silenced by fear and manipulation, had become a powerful tool for protecting others and advocating for change. As Emma prepared to graduate from college with honors and begin her career as a social worker specializing in adolescent trauma, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The 17-year-old girl who had once sat confused and frightened in Ms. Rodriguez's office had grown into a confident woman with the skills and determination to make a real difference in the world. Emma's story became one of transformation and empowerment, proving that even the most traumatic experiences could be channeled into positive change. Her courage in speaking up had not only protected other students, but had also led to systemic changes that would benefit countless young people in the future. She had learned that her voice mattered, that her truth had power, and that standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult, could create waves of positive change that extended far beyond her own experience.